So this is one of two panels that we've set up. This is one of two panels that we've set up to talk about causes of incidents that are, well, two of the main causes of incidents that either, in the case of excavation damage, do the most harms in terms of deaths and injuries, and this one is on internal corrosion because it is one of the highest causes of significant incidents on transmission lines. So today we have a panel of 4 speakers. Matt Barranca, who's the Assistant Director of the GAO office, who's going to speak about a report that they recently finished. Ken Lee, who's the Director of Engineering and Research Division in PHMSA. Tony Risk, Vice President, Operations and Engineering with Boardwalk Pipelines. And Steve Ernst, Corrosion Manager Services with Marathon. I'd encourage you to read their bios in the packet. I'm not going to take the time now because we ran a few minutes late trying to get set up. So they do have more information about their professional histories in the packet. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt as soon as I can get your presentation up here.
Thank you very much. My name is Matt Barranca, and I'm an Assistant Director with GAO's Physical Infrastructure Team. And I want to thank the folks at the Pipeline Safety Trust for inviting the GAO to present on our recent work from August 2015. The title of the report is up here. Additional actions could improve federal use of data on pipeline materials and corrosion. I'll be presenting on one objective from the report. The much larger report is available for free on our website at gao.gov. Able to download it if you would like. Just for those of you who may not be familiar with the U.S. Government Accountability Office, we are a legislative branch office. We work for Congress investigating the federal, the executive branch agencies. Pipeline safety is a very small sliver of the areas that the GAO touches. We review everything from the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, basically every federal agency anywhere where federal taxpayer dollars are spent. We issue upwards of 1,000 reports and testimonies and other products a year, and really only a handful of those cover pipeline safety. And just to let you know that our mission is to make sure that the federal agencies are conducting their missions in a cost-effective and efficient manner and meeting their goals and objectives. So the source of this report is from the PIPES Act of 2016. The report was issued in August, and it was issued to Senate Commerce Committee, House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and Senate House Energy and Commerce Committee. The report is written for a lay audience, so there may be some technical personnel here who have much greater knowledge about the materials and the corrosion prevention technologies that are used in the pipeline industry. Our perspective is to write towards a wider lay audience, including members of Congress. There are several other mandates for GAO in the PIPES Act that we're currently working on. A couple of the larger studies are contingent upon PHMSA issuing final rules for hazardous liquids and natural gas safety. Those were identified by Alan Mayberry this morning. So that work will be coming as soon as PHMSA takes the next steps in issuing their rulemakings. So this report had 3 fairly large objectives to address the mandate. The first one was to describe the materials used in the U.S. pipeline network, looking at the range of steels used, cast iron, plastics, and other materials that are in the network, as well as the various corrosion prevention technologies used by the industry to manage corrosion and some of the benefits and limitations of both of those issues, the materials and the corrosion prevention technologies. And also we looked at how pipeline operators train the personnel who work on pipelines, including to address corrosion issues, and any challenges they have with ensuring that that those personnel are qualified to do that work. But the third objective is the one that I'll be talking about today, which is evaluating how PHMSA uses data on pipelines and corrosion prevention to inform its inspection priorities. Real quickly on the methodology, what we did was we assessed the data that PHMSA has available to itself when it is determining its inspection priorities, and that includes the inspection data that it collects through integrated inspections, as well as the enforcement data, as well as operator reported data through annual reports. And we evaluated how PHMSA uses this data through its risk ranking index model, which we'll explain a little bit in more detail in a second. We conducted a number of interviews with PHMSA personnel, both at headquarters and across the country, who's involved in these inspections. And we compared PHMSA's approach with federal standards for internal control put out by the GAO, as well as OMB guidance on risk analyses, as well as with PHMSA's own strategic plan. So real high level, this information won't be new to folks in this room, but as you know, we have a wide-ranging pipeline network in the United States that includes gathering, transmission, and distribution pipelines. The focus of our work in this presentation is on the transmission pipelines and even a small segment of those pipelines, which are the interstate pipelines that we looked at. And those are the pipelines that are directly inspected by PHMSA. Those pipelines are, of course, also under the integrity management programs, and the pipeline operators maintain their own systems and perform their own safety evaluations. But we were looking at PHMSA's approach to doing their own inspections of interstate pipelines. Just a couple things to note about PHMSA's role in terms of oversight. The states also have a great role in terms of managing and overseeing interstate pipelines. PHMSA's role is on conducting what they are known as integrated inspections. And these are primarily desk reviews, but they also include going out and walking the lines with pipeline operators and identifying areas of concern that operators may have identified with regard to how their cathodic protection is operating, or evaluating areas that operators may have reported to PHMSA in terms of challenges with either bare pipe or perhaps ineffective coating. And PHMSA uses its inspection staff, approximately 200 or so individuals across the United States, to perform these as well as other activities, and Ken can probably talk more about that, about how that staff works. Real high level, I think the other panelists on the other speakers on this panel will talk about internal corrosion. But between 2010 and 2015, corrosion-related significant incidents accounted for about 22% of all significant incidents that were reported by operators. Within that corrosion, there is, of course, external corrosion events, and there's also internal corrosion events. And the prevalence of those specific types of events can vary across the pipeline network, and I think the operators here can talk about where internal corrosion is most prevalent and what they do to address it. So in terms of findings from our report, what we've found generally is that, yes, indeed, PHMSA does make use of data to target and prioritize its integrated inspections of interstate pipelines. However, there is some areas in which it could improve its process, particularly around how it documents the decisions it makes for which pipeline segments to target for its inspections, as well as ensuring that the process that it is employing is effective towards identifying those pipelines that are of highest risk and in most need of inspection. To do this tool, to prioritize these inspections, it uses what PHMSA calls its risk ranking index model. And what it does, it captures all of the risks within an individual pipeline segment and tries to quantify that risk and then assign either a high, a medium, or low score to that pipeline segment. And based on that score, pipelines are either inspected by PHMSA on a 3-year basis if they are considered high risk, and a 7-year basis if they're low risk. Medium risk pipelines are to be inspected every 5 years by PHMSA. And just to give you a sense for how this model works, basically PHMSA looks at the characteristics of an individual pipeline segment and quantifies those characteristics according to various threats that it considers to be indicative of potential incidents. So for example, one of the primary characteristics is unit miles, and that's basically the length of the pipeline segment that they're inspecting. And generally, under the risk ranking index model, the longer the pipeline segment, the greater the relative risk there is, because the longer the pipeline segment, you would have more opportunity for a potential event. Other threat factors include bare pipe mileage, and whether there is ineffective coding that's been reported by the operators. For example, if an operator identifies that coding has perhaps been desponded along one of those pipeline segments somewhere, they're having to apply additional cathodic protection, they can report that to PHMSA, and that will go into the model, and PHMSA will use to evaluate the severity of the potential risk. Other events include significant incidents, and there's other incidents other events that we also include in the report that you can look at. It also included low frequency ERW pipeline miles and other factors as well. It takes all of these threats and PHMSA assigns a weight to each of these threats, adds up the total weight. That weight results in a potential score, and that score is multiplied against a consequence. It's basically looks at the pipeline diameter, how much commodity couldn't be sent through the pipe, also the type of commodity, as well as whether it's in a high consequence area, and it results in a score that PHMSA uses to assign either high, medium, or low risk. So what we found was that while PHMSA is making use of the data that it has available, while it doesn't have all the data that it would like to make more targeted assessments of risk, we found that PHMSA has not fully documented the rationale behind some of the key assumptions within the model. And that becomes a challenge when PHMSA goes back to look at how effective the model is and whether the assumptions that it's made about pipeline risk are still accurate, and whether PHMSA is targeting its inspection forces towards those risks as they currently are. So among the areas of concern that we identified was whether PHMSA had used data to determine the specific weights for individual pipeline threats, as well as the thresholds for risk tiers. So each pipeline segment is given a score, and PHMSA has determined that anything over a 30 is considered high risk, anything below 5 is low risk, and anything in between is medium risk. We would expect to see that there would be documentation for why 30 is in particular a high-risk pipeline and why 5 is a low-risk pipeline, and how those judgments were made. The same thing with inspection frequency. Federal internal control standards as well as OMB standards require that any judgments that are put inside a model that's used for assessing risk by the federal government, that those assumptions be clearly stated, and that it be based on available data, and that PHMSA use that data to make those assumptions so that they can be further evaluated in the future. So just of how the model works, as a result of the threats and the weight factors, in 2016, PHMSA's run of the model, basically 70% of all pipeline mileage that PHMSA inspects is considered high risk and is subject to PHMSA integrated inspections every 3 years. 1% of all pipeline miles that PHMSA inspects are considered low risk and are subject to inspection every 7 years. So from our perspective, that balance may be correct. That's up to PHMSA in terms of how it wants to allocate its resources, but we would expect that there be documentation in place for the rationale for that, for how this model works. And considering that PHMSA has limited resources by which to conduct those inspections, approximately 200 personnel across the country, making sure that it's applying those resources to address the highest risk pipelines is important to ensuring the safety of the system. So GAO made 2 recommendations to PHMSA, the first being that PHMSA document the decisions and the underlying assumptions within the model. including how the various threat factors and the weights were determined, and that also that PHMSA put together a process to evaluate the effectiveness of the model, and that it evaluate and validate that the model is working as it intended. So those are generally the recommendations we made. PHMSA was very helpful in our review. They provided us with great access to data, a lot of great expertise within the agency to answer our questions, and they have agreed to address both recommendations by the end of calendar year 2018. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, we'll be sure to answer them later on.
Thanks, Matt. We're going to hold questions until everybody's finished. Next up, we have Ken Lee with PHMSA. And there you go. Just hit the right arrow for him.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ken Lee. I'm Director of Engineering and Research at PHMSA Pipeline Safety Office. So we are the federal regulator for oil and gas pipelines in the United States, and we regulate mainly downstream processed hydrocarbon pipelines, so we're not involved in production. I'm a technical guy, but I realize there's a lot of non-technical people in the room, so I'm going to try to give a non-technical talk. So I just want to give you a background, what internal corrosion is and how it occurs. So steel is made from iron ore, which is pretty much iron oxide. That's how it's found in the ground. And then we need to melt it and take the oxygen out to make steel, to make it strong and tough enough so we can use it for buildings, bridges, and pipelines. But it naturally wants to go to a lower energy state combined with oxygen. That's why, iron will rust. And so we need to keep it away from oxygen so it doesn't go back into iron ore to being rust again. And so we mainly do that, by coating the pipeline on the outside. And the inside of the pipeline is usually bare because we could tightly control the pipe. Inside of the pipe is sealed from the outside. So on the outside of the pipe, we usually have, we think about wet soil, that could corrode the pipe. So we usually have a pipeline coating. It could be coal tar for old pipe. New pipe is usually fusion bonded epoxy, which is almost like melting plastic on the outside of the steel pipe. And also we apply an electrical current because corrosion is an electrochemical process. We can drastically slow it down or prevent corrosion from occurring by applying electricity to the steel pipe. The main method to control corrosion on the inside is to control the composition of the natural gas to keep it dry, or if it's a liquid line, to keep water and other impurities out of that line. So in general, oil and gas is not corrosive to steel. It's just the impurities which are. So here's a list of some of the impurities. We try to keep out water, carbon dioxide, chlorides, like what may be found in salt, and hydrogen sulfide. Some of you may have heard the term sour gas. So hydrogen sulfide results from organic decomposition, like the rotten egg smell, and we try to keep that out. Other things that may occur is if water is present inside the pipeline, bacteria, microbes may grow, and essentially they poop acid, which will dissolve the steel. So that can occur on liquid lines. And also there's a rule of thumb regarding temperature, that every increase in 10 degrees C will double the corrosion rate. So, so that will affect corrosion. And also, most pipelines flow at about more than 10 miles per hour, and that keeps the product flowing. It will sweep away any water or impurities in there. If you have slow-moving velocity streams, you could get stagnant flow. If the water sits in one spot for a while, it could localize the corrosion in that one area. So there are many different pie charts. So this is a snapshot in time of some of the top causes of pipeline failures. This is a chart of significant incidents by cause, 2010 to 2016. And you'll see that all these charts kind of are a little bit different because they're of a specific snapshot in time of specific pipeline systems. So here you see that the top cause of hazardous liquid pipeline, significant incidents in this time range was material failure of the pipe or weld, and that's followed by corrosion, which is that red slice there. And you see corrosion is split up, where internal corrosion is 14%, external corrosion is 11%. So that's a further broken down box of what the corrosion cause is. So this is for hazardous liquid lines. It's similar for natural gas transmission. You see, 17% of significant incidents were caused by internal corrosion. And then here is gas distribution. Can someone tell me why the corrosion rates are much lower with gas distribution? Anybody? Yes, there's a lot of plastic pipe that's used, and plastic does not corrode. So that's one of the great things about plastic. The main downside is, it's much weaker than steel, so it's less practical and economical to build a large diameter, high pressure transmission line out of plastic. So corrosion is much less of an issue with gas distribution systems in general. So corrosion is also a time-dependent mechanism. I think many of you know that, an old car tends to be rustier than a new car. So here we have a chart of a pipeline vintages. I think it's the, and for unknown and pre-1940 pipe, the leading cause is corrosion because there's a lot more time that corrosion can take place. So I want to highlight some of the significant internal corrosion incidents. The real game changer in the industry was the 2000 Carlsbad, New Mexico incident where 12 people died camping next to a gas transmission pipeline in a Class 1 location in essentially the middle of nowhere. But they were right next to a segment of the line which collected a lot of liquids, and that caused internal corrosion of this line, which was not subject to inline inspection. We passed new regulations since then, which I will focus on to help prevent an incident like that from occurring again. And this is a partial list of some of the other incidents here involving liquid lines. As you see, most of the significant incidents are smaller releases. So the main way that we control internal corrosion is by making sure that the product inside the pipe is not corrosive, and we do that by controlling the impurities in the pipe. There's a lot of monitoring which takes place, and for natural gas, the FERC tariff requires 7 pounds of water maximum per million cubic feet of natural gas, and a lot of times, the customer has specifications for, the amount of quality and impurities that are allowed in the product. So another way is to minimize stagnant flow in a line. If the product's always flowing, pretty much corrosion will not localize in one place if the corrosion products are constantly moving. For natural gas lines, it's important to remove the water because without water, really, a natural gas line corrosion really does not occur. And there's also, frequent monitoring inspections which take place. And that's a very important part, because if you don't look for it, you won't find what you're not looking for. So, coupons are placed in the pipeline. There's monitoring equipment to test for the amount of water, CO2, H2S, and there can be alarms that go off in the control room if they exceed certain levels. So, to remove water, cleaning pigs are often run to push water out of the system. Inhibitors are added to slow down corrosion rates, especially in liquid lines. Biocides are added to stop the microbes from growing. These are like antibiotics to keep the bacteria level down. And there could be other chemical additives as well. And inline inspection tools are one of the best tools to use to detect internal corrosion. And you'll see that is throughout the pipeline safety regulations, running ILI tools as a part of effective integrity management to control corrosion rates. So corrosion is mentioned throughout the federal code. These are some of the Part 195 code sections that apply to hazardous liquid pipelines. It says the product inside the pipe must be chemically compatible with the steel pipeline. So there's an entire subpart on corrosion control, and integrity management focuses highly on corrosion there. And similar, in the gas code, in the Part 192 code for natural gas pipelines, there's similar sections in there. And I'll talk about the 192, 475, and in the next slide. So in the natural gas code, it pretty much says, corrosive gas may not be transported by pipeline. So it's pretty clear, prescriptive on that. And it says, whenever a pipe is removed from the system, the internal surface must be inspected for evidence of corrosion. So whenever you're doing pipe replacement, that's something that you need to be looking for. And since the 2000 Carlsbad incident, this regulation was put into Part 192. And this refers to that to reduce the risk of liquids that may collect in the line. And so natural gas pipelines must have an effective liquids removal features, and you must have devices for monitoring internal corrosion. These typically occur in low spots or drips in the line, or parts of the natural gas line that may have stagnant flow, where more water may sit. So if there's no water there, pretty much, you will not have internal corrosion. So PHMSA, we have many tools. Many of you know about our regulations. We also have, about 150 pipeline inspectors, and I think more than 300 partner state inspectors that are out there inspecting pipelines nationwide. We also take enforcement action with the corrective action orders, fines, penalties. But one of the nicest tools, I think one of the most effective tools, I think, is the research side. We have a $12 million a year research budget to try to improve pipeline safety. And it's more of the carrot approach rather than the stick. So we try to shoot for improving best practice, improving the technologies versus the punishment side. And here's a small snapshot of some of the research which we fund. These can include, like on the top left, tools to inspect previously unpiggable pipelines. So that is a robot, a self-powered robot that can crawl inside a pipeline that you previously were not able to run it inline in inspection tool. We also work on developing technologies to improve the sensors to better detect defects in the pipe. On the bottom left, there's an acoustical ball that can listen for pipeline leaks. On the right-hand side, you see leak detection technologies by rotary and fixed wing. Some use laser technology looking for hydrocarbon signatures. To look for gas and oil leaks on the right-of-way. We also have, welding technologies in the ditch methods, like what you see in the center. And on the bottom center, we also fund research to improve the models for the remaining strength calculations to predict, how much life would you have left in that pipeline. So specifically related to internal corrosion, these are some of the projects which we have. The first one is on advancing the technologies that are used in these inline inspection tools to improve the probability of detection, the accuracy, to be able to find smaller defects. The second one there is we have models that are widely used in industry, including R-string, and we have research to improve these models to provide better calculations on when, how much life you have left in the line, so we could effectively manage it before it fails. And the third one there is interesting. That refers to MIC, or the bacterial microbe growth, and it uses essentially an antibiotic cocktail. Instead of using one antibiotic, it's a mixture of several to prevent microbes from growing inside of that line. And on the last one is to provide earlier detection of corrosion rates. So that provides us, a very quick summary. Internal corrosion remains a focus of PHMSA. We're very concerned about it, and we have efforts on all fronts to try to address this. The regulatory side, inspection and enforcement side, and the side that falls under me is the engineering and research side, which we try to really advance the industry, working with service providers and standards to try to improve it on that realm. Thank you. Yeah, the screen popped up. I'm not sure I get it.
Oh, so you couldn't see. That was fun. It's
Oh, maybe, I don't know.
yeah, I'm just gonna fill it out so it stops coming.
Looks like I'm done. What happened?
It's an automatic thing to restart my Wi-Fi, which I don't need, so. All right. Okay, thanks, Ken. Next up, we have Tony Risk with Boardwalk Pipeline Partners. Take me just a second here. If that Monteleone screen shows up again, just exit out. Just
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so
Thank you.
it'll show your next one and just arrow
Which one?
right.
Arrow right?
Yep.
Okay. Good morning. I'm a lot shorter than the rest of the gang, so I might have to tippy-toe. I'll try to make this brief and entertaining. I do have lots of pictures and cool stuff to show you. My name is Tony Risk. I'm Vice President of Engineering and Operations for Boardwalk Pipeline. I've been doing pipeline integrity work as one of my responsibilities for 20-some years, and Monteleone just showed up. So what do I do? Just exit out? Upper left? Okay. So I want to talk to you today strictly about internal corrosion. I'm going to skip a couple of these charts. I'm going to show you an interesting trend in the last few years. So you see, let me go to the next one, it's probably better. So you see that internal corrosion is actually lower in terms of number of incidents than external corrosion. Stress corrosion cracking, who's heard of that? Okay, so that's some kind of bad stuff, right? We track all that information. Obviously, we send it to PHMSA. This comes from PHMSA. So we're going to talk about internal corrosion specifically, which is not the highest number of related failures reported, but it's a very significant event. So now, can somebody tell me at the bottom left side, why is all the corrosion at the bottom? That's where the water sits. So internal corrosion is typically between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock. So if you cut a pipe open and you see stuff like this at the bottom, like that one at the bottom left, you know, I can charge you $10 million to tell you what's the cause. But it's internal corrosion. That piece of pipe was cut from a storage field. We don't have to cut it to see it. We can x-ray it, kind of like you x-ray your tooth. So that's what we normally do when we dig a location and we want to see if it has internal corrosion. We x-ray it, because if you use your ultrasonic thickness probe and you happen to put it here on the outside, you're not going to see anything. It's not going to measure anything. So it just depends where you put your probe. You might get lucky and see a wall loss, or you might not. So we x-ray it so we know where it's going. Now, internal corrosion is caused by water in the pipeline. That's it. If you have no water, you have no corrosion. So the question is, well, duh, get the water out. Well, that's what we try to do every day, every hour, every minute. Now, there's a lot of stuff once it's mixed with the water that causes us problems. Salts, glycol, bacteria. Yeah, bacteria lives in our pipelines. And they are nasty little critters. And they poop often. So we try to... Now, how do we control it? We have many different ways of controlling internal corrosion. And after Carlsbad, I did a lot of work for El Paso during that time. And after Carlsbad, we really got a lot more engaged and serious about trying to apply every tool in the toolbox to get rid of internal corrosion. So how do we do that? There are piggable pipelines and non-piggable pipelines in this country. For a piggable pipeline, it's really fairly simple. You clean it, you pig it, you inspect it, you find this stuff, and if it needs to be fixed, you fix it. Sounds pretty logical. But the problem we have is we don't have all of our pipelines piggable. So we have to deal with non-piggable pipelines. So how do we go about not allowing internal corrosion? The first thing you got to do is try to make sure that there's no water in the pipe. So you monitor gas quality. We have gas chromatographs everywhere, right? So we try to make sure that there's no water that enters the pipeline. I would rather do that than have the pipeline full of water and then have to deal with it. Does that make sense? So we try to get the water out, we monitor and we sample. Who's heard of coupons? And these are not the stuff you redeem at Walmart. Okay, we'll show you a picture of those. The second line of defense is clean the line. Now, in our company, every time we clean a pipeline, we sample what comes out. That's an automatic. We take a sample of the water or of the fluid, we send it to a lab, the lab runs the analysis and tells us what's in that cocktail mixture. So that information is very important because that tells me if I need to increase the frequency of my cleaning or not. So if I run a pig and I get nothing, why do I need to run it next month? I can probably delay it a few months. Now, if I run a tool, or if I run a cleaning pig and I see a lot of bacteria, then I have to do something else. So sampling, monitoring, and detection is a very critical part of internal corrosion defense. And then our best tool really is an MFL tool, magnetic flux leakage, our smart pig. There's a reason why they call it a smart pig. because there are dump pigs too. I'm going to show you a picture of those. Okay, so gas quality, we just have to enforce our tariffs. We know we're not supposed to have less than 7 pounds of water, so we just have to enforce it. If somebody gives you more 7 pounds of water, then you have to either shut them in or make a quick phone call and say, hey, what's up? What's happening? Carbon dioxide is a very critical part, and we have a tariff for that. Hydrogen sulfide, we have a tariff for that. So we do not want to allow more than 7 pounds of water. We have online analyzers, and we do have automatic shut-in valves. Now, a producer can get really ugly if your shut-in valve is 30 minutes. So they want it to be 30 years. So we start our negotiation between 30 minutes and 30 years, and we end up probably in about an hour. So we have to give the producer time to make sure his glycol tank is full, to make sure his treatment system is working, but we need to be prepared to shut him in so we don't allow a lot of water in the pipe. Now, how do we monitor? Coupons, weight loss coupons. These are the guys at the bottom left. So basically, it's a piece of steel of a very, very specific weight. We measure it down to the thousandths of a gram, and it has a code on it, a number. We insert it into the pipeline at very specific location. We have to know where that is. And then we come back every 6 months, we pull it out, and we measure, and we weigh it again. If it loses weight, this means there's corrosion, and we can calculate that, simple calculation. And if it doesn't lose weight, then there is no internal corrosion. It's not happening during that 6 months period. Now, the ER probes, electrical resistance probes, are a little more complicated. They're a little more interesting. We like those. These are just another way to monitor. It gives you an awful lot of information other than just weight loss. And then you see those vials at the bottom? These are inoculation samples. So when we pull something out of a pipeline like water, we use a syringe and we inoculate these vials. Everything that turns black is sulfate-reducing bacteria. And by the number of bottles, we know what the concentration is. So there's a very specific procedure on how to inoculate those bottles. We play doctors sometime. And the right-hand side, the right-hand ones are acid-producing bacteria, APBs. So we have to deal with SRBs and APBs. But if you really do a good job of sampling, monitoring, and testing, then you really can concentrate where the problem is, rather than just apply a shotgun approach. So we collect the deposits. We adjust the cleaning frequency based on the results. We do chemically treat certain pipelines. I'll show you a picture of an injection pump. And biocide to kill bacteria. Now, the biocides, we have many different kinds. My favorite is formaldehyde. It works when I'm dead, and it works in the pipeline. That is my favorite biocide. Inline inspection, obviously. And inline inspection is really interesting because when you run that tool and you get that data, if you see a very specific area of a high concentration of internal corrosion, then you have to start asking yourself a question. And a lot of times, it is just downstream from a producer. Ding, ding. So, you know, that information is very, very, very important. Our pipelines are really clean. On the left-hand side, lower left-hand side, that's a lot of junk coming out of that pipe. Yeah, I have some pictures that would make you wonder. And the one on the right-hand side, the one in the middle is a brush cleaning pig. There's brushes, there's cups, there's all kinds of different ones, more aggressive, less aggressive. We clean our lines based on specific, the line has to be piggable. You cannot clean an unpiggable pipeline. So the pipeline has to be piggable in order for you to launch these cleaning tools. That's a dumb pig. That pig doesn't think. You put it in a trap, you put gas behind it, it hydroplanes all the way to the end. And it brings all that stuff with it. And if we see a lot of stuff, we run it again, and again, and again and again until nothing comes out. We have pipelines that we've ran 500, 600, 700 cleaning pigs. If it's a pipeline that's never been pigged before and we just made it piggable, it will take that much. So that's how we clean our pipelines. This is an injection pump. It injects a very certain amount of chemical based on flow. So when you have more flow, it injects more. When you have less flow, it injects less. And we calculate that. And we don't just go and just dump stuff. Then we go downstream and we take monitoring samples. So we see if the chemical is still effective, how far down the line it's going. So there's a little bit more science behind it. It's not just, you know, drop a bomb and walk away. What's the one on the top right-hand side? That's an AUT, an automatic ultrasonic thickness tool. So basically, it just goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in that little area that we're testing all the way around the pipe and collects all that information. The bottom right is an X-ray. I'm very fond of X-ray when it comes to internal corrosion. We X-ray the heck out of everything because, you know, it really can tell you. And one on the left, that's a magnetic flux leakage tool. That's a smart pig. The dumb pig has no sensors. The smart pig has sensors and computers. And these are very, very good tools. And they're getting better and better and better. I remember the first one that I ever saw. And you couldn't run it for too far because there's not enough batteries. And the 40 megabyte hard drive was about this big. Now I have a terabyte in a chip like this, right? So now I can run 120 miles in a tool run and not have to worry about running out of memory or running out of battery. And the sensors are different. If you look at here, you see a lot of magnets. A lot of these tools also are dual tools. They are also a caliper tool at the same time to find dents. At the same time, it's an MFL tool. So we run those a lot too. And there are different tools. But this type of tool works very well on corrosion. Now, what do I do with non-piggable pipelines? Look at that top right-hand picture. What's in there? Junk? Oh, stuff. I like stuff better than junk. Stuff. Now, where did that stuff come from? Years and years and years in service. This pipeline is vintage 40s, never been cleaned. In the 40s, they didn't think of this stuff. They didn't think of running pigs and cleaning. And it was just a matter of building it and move gas. So this is an area where we look in our plans and we see where the sags are. Pipelines are not straight. So we look at the worst sag, we dig it up, we cut it, and that's what we find. So how do I control internal corrosion in this type of situation? Well, I can't pig it, so the only thing I can do is prevent water from getting in there. So I monitor. I select certain locations. I X-ray. I install a lot of coupons. And I develop a plan to somehow get these lines made piggable and cleaned. We do the same with all of our storage fields. Storage fields are very difficult fields to pig. So we have a site-specific plan for each storage field because everyone is different. So basically, it's monitor, analyze, inspect. So finally, that's my last one. We do a very good job with piggable lines. We do an excellent job. That's why our internal corrosion rate failures goes down. We just have to find a way to deal with non-piggable pipelines. And there is thousands and thousands of miles of that stuff. Well, questions at the end, right? Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Next up and last on the panel, we have Steve Ernst with Marathon Pipeline. And
The presentation.
yep, there we go. So there may be a window from the hotel that pops up. If it does, just up in the upper left-hand corner, exit out, and it'll,
Okay.
so you'll see your slides again. Right arrow to go to the next slide.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, well, good morning. My name is Steve Ernst. I'm with Marathon Pipeline. I am currently the Integrity Management Services Manager. Prior to that, I was in our Corrosion Management Services group. So I'm going to talk a little bit about preventing and mitigating corrosion to advance pipeline integrity, but I'm also going to touch a little bit more in depth on the inline inspection or ILI side. So I'm going to start off, and I am going to talk about internal and external corrosion as well, and we'll see some of that in the data. Start off with some graphs. So one thing that we know so far is that everybody likes pie charts and graphs. So some of this is similar to what you saw from Ken and Matt, and just the time period is a little bit different. So if we look at liquids pipeline releases over the last 5 years, and this is from the API data mining team, there's about 2,100 releases, and about 20% of the data is from corrosion, and the remaining 80%, or the remaining 4 out of 5 other releases, are from other causes. And I've got a window popping up here. Okay, there we go. So while corrosion makes up a significant chunk, there are other causes as well. I want to dive in a little bit further into the pie slice that relates to corrosion. Here. Okay, so when we look at this, we can look, kind of divide it in between facilities and mainline. And you see about a 50-50 split between facilities and mainline. By facilities, generally referring to a location that is within an operator's fence line. And when you look deeper into the facilities, you do see that internal corrosion is the larger cause, about 80%, while external is about 20%. And Tony did a good job explaining some of the risks there. In the facilities on the liquid side, this is where you see some of your unpickable pipe, some of the more difficult to inspect pipelines. Now on the main line, and this refers to the pipe that's outside of the facilities, this is the pipe that might go across country on the right-of-way. What you see is that external corrosion is about 1.5 times as frequent as internal corrosion. So no presentation would be complete without some good pictures here. And corrosion is a naturally occurring force, as Ken explained. So the pictures can be pretty interesting. And what I learned today is you're supposed to say poop in your presentation when you talk about internal corrosion. That's on the left. So what we see is a classic picture of internal corrosion. And what you can find is really a highly localized pit, which is why if you're just scanning from the outside with the UT, you might miss it. And this is often caused by microbes and water being present at the same location. Picture on the right is showing external corrosion. And it can take many different forms and many different causes, but often you're going to see a pit or a cluster or field of pits, just depending on the cause. So next, what I would like to do is introduce the concept of design, prevention, and mitigation. And I want to use the layers of defense model and the holes in the cheese. I think a lot of people have seen the holes in the cheese. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide as well to talk through some different layers of defense. And I'm also going to use some medical analogies that I think everybody will be able to relate to. So just like every person's unique, every pipeline system is unique. It's got different characteristics. And so related to our health, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. You kind of got to tailor it to the person. And similar on a pipeline, the layers of defense need to be tailored to that pipeline system. So I want to step through some of the layers of defense. Some of these have been touched upon already, but we'll go through them again anyway in case some folks are seeing it for the first time and kind of want a second round. So First layer of defense, and I don't know how clear the screen is in the back, so I'll talk through this. First layer of defense is the pipe. It's steel, incredibly strong, and it's what we build our pipelines out of. But it's got an Achilles heel. Pipe, it will corrode if it's not protected when it's set in the environment. So, oops. See a little bit different on the screen here. Okay, so the first line of defense against external corrosion is going to be your external pipe coating. And in some applications, people are internally lining pipe as well, so that if you have water contacting it at a low point, you're protected. Next line of defense is cathodic protection. And remember the Achilles heel we talked about with the steel? Well, thankfully, as far back as 1824, some really smart scientists learned that if you apply a little bit of current to the pipe, it prevents it from corroding. And these practices are still in place today. Third line of defense is test stations. If you've ever been on a pipeline right away, see a post with a cap, sometimes it's a red cap, sometimes it's a yellow cap, is a test station. It's a location where you can inspect and monitor the health of your cathodic protection system, and that can point to your effectiveness on that layer of control. Got another pop-up here. Okay. Tony taught us about smart pigs and dumb pigs. Next line of defense is a dumb pig, a cleaning pig. It's a great tool to push water or solids out of your pipeline. And we also learned about inline inspection, or ILI. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit more time in the second half of this presentation talking about inline inspection. It's really a great layer of defense to technology because it helps us connect a lot of different dots on our system. It provides great information that we can use to design additional layers of defense. For example, one thing on the main line with your combination tools, you may be able to identify where a low point is located. And that's where water could collect, or solids. And that may be a place you want to look closer at in your program. Now, of course, on an unpiggable line, such as a facility, understanding where your low point is at is also important. That way you can go ahead and design inspection programs for that location. Now, you might choose to sample your low point to understand what's going on internal in the environment in the inside of the pipe. Analyze your, for example, your water or your microbial activity. Another layer of control that you might implement following an inspection is look at your inhibitor or biocide program. You might learn that you have some additional internal corrosion pits on your pipeline, and you want to adjust your program, or maybe something's changed on your internal properties of what you're shipping, and you need to implement a program. Another piece of technology that we see is corrosion rate monitoring. Your tools and your inspections can help identify where you may have a corrosion pit. It could be internal, it could be external, but it's important to understand how that might change so that you can help determine when your next inspection is. So you're looking for growth or change. And finally, you might learn something brand new about your pipeline that you weren't aware of, a new threat. And looking at the entire system can really help out where you might need to look a little bit closer. So I know I've thrown a lot at you. The takeaway here is that each system's unique, and your layers of defense that you're implementing for internal corrosion protection or external corrosion protection need to be tailored to that specific system. And so shifting gears, ILI technology is a significant layer of defense. And I want to walk the group, on the next slide, I want to walk through, actually the next 5 slides. I'm going to use the same flow chart at the top, but I want to walk through a plan, do, check, adjust model that Marathon Pipeline uses to look at our inline inspection program. Now, if you look through it, it may look similar to other continuous improvement models that you've seen, but for this one, there's 3 main phases. The blue box on the top left, this is the application of technology. So I'm going to pick a tool. I'm going to pick something I'm going to use to solve the problem. The middle box is analyzing and integrating data. After I complete the inspection, I'm going to look at it, and I want to understand what the data tells me. And then the third is validating performance. I wanted to look at what I found, what was called versus what was found. How did my tool work, and how can I adjust and continuously improve? The inline inspection process is a strong partnership between operators and the technology providers. I think in the afternoon we're going to hear a little bit more upstairs on smart tools. So the first step is matching the technology to the threat on the pipeline. And there can be a lot of factors to consider. There are a lot of different tool types. So you might look at your age of your pipeline, or your diameter, your metallurgy, the coating type, the environment that the pipeline's in. And you want to select a tool that is most suited for that pipeline. And there are overlaps. Some of the threats that are listed at the bottom, dents, metal loss, cracks, or disbonded coating. When we're looking at corrosion or wall loss, we're really using an ultrasonic or magnetic technology. And on the slide, those are listed as UTWM or MFL. So another medical analogy, think of an MRI or an ultrasound that you use to examine a patient. The the magnetic flux leakage technology, that creates an image of the pipe wall. And the ultrasonic technology also creates an image of the pipe wall. And all that information that's collected by the SMART tool is stored and then ultimately processed into meaningful information. So here's a few pictures of the tool, of the different tools, of what they look like. And one thing I wanted to point out is as the technology has improved over the years, what we're seeing, and this is a very positive thing, is that we're seeing that the resolution, 3 minutes? Okay, I'm going to step on the gas here. We're seeing that the resolution is getting better and better. So some tools are identifying, looking for a metal loss anomaly of 0.2 inches by 0.2 inches. It's a really, really tiny square. So you think about it this way, there's about 25 of those on my watch face, or about 63 million of those in 1 mile of 12-inch pipe. So that's a lot of data to process through. The tools are great in seeing the data, but you need to align it in the correct way. So this is a good transition to the next phase, which is analyzing and integrating data. And similar to a medical checkup, we want a doctor to bring together all the information and read our charts. We want the tools to bring together information that then our integrity specialists can overlay with a lot of other data layers. And some of them are listed on the screen. The underlines are items more specific to corrosion threats, but all the data is important. And GIS is a great way to overlay the data. And in this phase, we spend a lot of time taking a look and studying the pipeline and understanding where to go and investigate further. The final phase is validating performance. And what this really means is this is the inspection. So excavating the pipeline, finding out what features are present on the surface of the pipe, and comparing what you found versus what the tool called. And this is a pretty key feedback phase because it can tell you how the tool may have performed elsewhere on your pipeline, and it gives you an opportunity to give the information back to the ILI vendors who build the tools and then can continuously improve or adjust their technology. Go to the wrap-up slide here. So I just kind of want to close on feedback and continuous improvement. I do think, I like what Ken said on the R&D and the technology. I think it's really key. It's important. It's a great vehicle for us to kind of continuously improve in the future. I also want to point out a few groups. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the efforts of some R&D groups. PRCI is the Pipeline Research Council. This group organizes millions of dollars of the industry's research. Research dollars on tracks such as corrosion, integrity and inspection, and design and construction, and many other areas. And that in partnership with organizations like API and NACE. NACE is the National Association of Corrosion Engineers. And we heard Dave Merck upstairs in the earlier session talk about all the detailed standards work that the API community does in partnership with operators and regulators and vendors and suppliers to create industry consensus documents. So I guess in closing, just looking at this, especially through the lens of API 1173, which is the safety management system for continuous improvement, plan, do, check, adjust, I think it lays a really good foundation to continue managing both internal and external corrosion threats. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. So we're a couple minutes over. If you're willing to stay and ask questions, we can do that. Otherwise, lunch is in the room next door, and we'll reconvene at 1:15 in the main ballroom for a couple of short sessions before the next breakout. If there are questions, I'm happy to hand a mic around. Hang on just a sec. Is this on? Yes. Don't get too close.
Hi. Oh, yeah. I'll just do it normally. So I'd like to hear your views on the corrosion caused by power lines. Is that something that is present in your networks, or any good story on that?
Oh, I've got plenty of stories. Yeah, AC corrosion is a very unique mechanism, and if you've seen it, it has a very unique pit morphology. So if you're experienced in integrity and in corrosion, if you see a very specific pit that is very well rounded at a very specific location, most likely a coating defect, and it's typically not, like normally corrosion is like ragged edges and lots of clusters, but I mean, I have pictures on my computer I can show you, but if it's a very unique morphology, then we start looking at power lines and AC power lines, and we can measure all that. We have formulas to calculate all that. Now, ever since AC corrosion became a known phenomenon, we start testing our pipelines for AC corrosion. Every time we do a close interval survey, we take AC potentials. So specifically in AC corridors. It's more prevalent on very well-coated pipelines, go figure, than it is on very poorly coated pipeline. So the better the coating, the better we do a job putting a much better coating. It actually, for AC corrosion standpoint, the current density becomes much higher because the surface area is much smaller. So we look for it, we know what it looks like, our tools can find it, and when we do our surveys, we take the measurements necessary to make those. But and nowadays when pipelines are being installed more into power corridors, because it's an easier right-of-way to get, if you haven't negotiated with a landowner recently. It's something we look at all the time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
How do you remediate it?
Oh, there's plenty of ways to do that. The best method to do it is to basically drain the AC transient currents back to the earth, and that's done through grounding systems. And the best grounding system out there, we've used zinc ribbon, we've used deep wells, we've used copper. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, decoupling devices. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. You just have to understand how high it is and where it is, and you can design an effective measure for it. It's not that hard.
Will you join me in thanking our panel, and we'll see you back upstairs at 1:15. Lunch is next door in the other Royal Room.